Imagine walking through a quiet, snowy town, the world muffled under a thick blanket of white, your breath visible in the icy air. Suddenly, a tiny, desperate whimper breaks the silence. A German shepherd puppy lies in the snow, trembling, barely alive, abandoned in the freezing cold. Who could leave such a young, defenseless life like this? What kind of world lets this happen? And why here, right in front of your eyes? This is the story of survival, courage, and a bond forged in the harshest winter. A tale that will warm your heart and remind us of hope against all odds. If you are watching right now, tell me where you are in the comments. I want to know who is joining us in this journey. The first snow of December had settled over Silver Pine, Colorado, transforming the small town into a winter wonderland. The lake at the edge of town lay frozen, glinting under the weak morning sun, surrounded by thick pine forest dusted with white. The streets were quiet, muffled by a soft blanket of fresh snow, and the occasional gust of wind made the branches sway as if whispering secrets. It was a Saturday morning, the kind that felt like peace itself had taken up residence in every home, until that peace fractured with the sound of a pitiful cry. Officer Ethan Calloway was walking his usual patrol route along the lake's perimeter, bundled in his navy blue winter patrol coat, its fur-lined hood pulled tight against the icy wind. Ethan was 42, tall and broad-shouldered, with a rugged face weathered from years of service in Silver Pine's police department. His dark hair was flecked with gray at the temples, eyes deep-set in a piercing shade of blue that rarely betrayed emotion, though today, even the hard edge of those eyes softened with concern. He moved cautiously along the snow-covered path, boots crunching against the frost, scanning for anything out of the ordinary. Ethan had been widowed for 4 years, and the quiet of his life had become almost unbearable, broken only by the routines of his job. He rarely allowed himself to hope or expect surprises, having learned the hard way that life in Silver Pine could change in a single breath. Then he heard it again, a low, weak whimper, followed by a shivering cough. It came from the trees lining the lake, a place where snow had already piled high on the brush. Ethan froze, instinct kicking in, and followed the sound. There, half hidden beneath the icy branches of a small spruce, lay a German shepherd puppy. Its coat was black and tan, thick in some areas but patchy and matted from exposure in others. Judging by its size and the way its paws seemed too large for its frame, Ethan estimated the pup to be around 5 months old. The dog's chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. Foam clung to the corners of its mouth, its eyes wide, glassy, filled with terror and confusion. The puppy trembled violently as Ethan approached, ears pressed flat to its head. There was a faint whimper, but otherwise the puppy made no sound. Ethan instinctively crouched, speaking softly, letting the cold air carry his voice. "Hey, buddy. It's okay. I got you." His voice seemed impossibly loud in the stillness of the snow-laden woods. He could see the ribs pressing against the thin layer of fur, feel the life barely clinging to the fragile body. Whoever had left this pup here had not considered mercy. It was impossible to tell whether the pup had been abandoned or poisoned, but the signs were clear. This creature was at the edge of death. Ethan carefully scooped the puppy into his arms. The weight was deceptive, all bone, fear, and the cold shock of life nearly extinguished. He wrapped the pup in his coat, feeling the tiny body shivering against his chest, head lolling weakly. "Don't quit on me, okay?" he whispered. The wind bit into his face, snowflakes melting quickly against the warmth of his breath. He ran back to his patrol car, his heart hammering. Each step felt heavy, as if the snow itself tried to pull him down, delay him, make him fail. Once inside the car, Ethan placed the puppy on a folded blanket in the passenger seat. Its body was limp, but he could feel a faint thrum of life in its chest. He grabbed his phone, dialing the emergency veterinary clinic in Silver Pine. The receptionist answered promptly, her voice calm but firm. Ethan explained the situation, describing the symptoms: shallow breathing, foam at the mouth, rigid limbs. They instructed him to come immediately, assuring that the staff would be ready to administer care the moment he arrived. The drive was tense. Snowflakes whipped against the windshield, and visibility was low. Ethan navigated carefully, skidding slightly on the ice-covered roads. He kept one arm wrapped around the pup, murmuring reassurances, even though he doubted the tiny creature understood the words. Every red light felt like an eternity, every passing car a potential obstacle. In that moment, the city of Silver Pine seemed both vast and desolate, a town blanketed in snow, but incapable of shielding this helpless life. Finally, Ethan pulled into the clinic's parking lot, tires crunching on packed snow. He burst through the automatic doors, arms still clinging to the puppy. A veterinary technician immediately moved forward, ready to take the pup into emergency care. Ethan handed over Blitz, though he hadn't named him yet, with one last whispered plea, "Please, just don't let him go." He stepped back, feeling suddenly empty, the fluorescent light of the clinic harsh against his eyes. The veterinarian, Dr. Alyssa Mercer, appeared moments later. Alyssa was in her early 30s, medium height, with curly brown hair tied back into a practical ponytail, and eyes that betrayed both kindness and an unshakable calm. She had worked in emergency veterinary care for nearly a decade, and her voice, though gentle, carried the weight of countless difficult nights. After a brief examination, she confirmed Ethan's worst fears: rodenticide poisoning. The young puppy had ingested it sometime overnight, and his internal bleeding was severe. Without immediate intervention, he would not survive. Ethan's hands trembled as he watched Alyssa hook the puppy up to an IV, carefully placing a tiny oxygen mask over its muzzle. The puppy's chest rose faintly with each labored breath. Ethan crouched near the recovery area, unable to look away. There was a strange familiarity in the puppy's gaze, a spark that reminded him of his dog Max, who had died years ago and had been his silent companion through childhood. In that moment, Ethan realized he had made a silent vow. He would not let this pup die in the cold. He called the local animal shelter hotline, reporting a found poisoned puppy. The woman on the line asked if he intended to surrender the pup if it survived. Without hesitation, Ethan said no. He couldn't imagine letting go, not now, not after carrying this fragile life through the storm. Alyssa returned a few moments later, reporting the first signs of stabilization after flushing the poison and administering supportive care. Ethan exhaled, unsure whether to hope or prepare for the worst. As he watched the puppy, its small body trembling under the medical equipment, something stirred within him. 4 years of silence, loneliness, and grief seemed to melt slightly under the weight of this tiny life. The puppy had chosen this moment, this place, to fight for survival. Ethan felt an old, long-dormant sense of purpose rekindle. He leaned closer, whispering, "You made it this far. Don't stop now." The puppy didn't respond, not yet, but neither did he give up. The snow continued to fall outside, thick and silent, blanketing Silverpine in white. The streets were empty, the town still asleep under winter's cold embrace. Inside, in the small clinic's recovery room, a fragile bond had already begun to form between a man and a pup, both survivors of their own kinds of storms. The chapter ended with Ethan sitting by the tiny creature, hands resting gently on its paw, eyes never leaving the chest that rose and fell with stubborn life. For now, the battle had begun, and Ethan was ready to fight it by Blitz's side. The snow fell thicker now, a relentless curtain of white that blurred the edges of Silverpine's streets and pressed the world into silence. Ethan Calloway gripped the steering wheel of his patrol car, knuckles white beneath leather gloves, eyes darting through the swirling flakes. The tires squealed faintly on the slick asphalt as he guided the car along the winding path toward the town's small veterinary clinic. In the passenger seat, wrapped tightly in a folded navy patrol coat, was Blitz, the German shepherd pup, whose tiny body shook violently despite the warmth Ethan tried to offer. Blitz's black and tan fur was matted, snow sticking to the damp patches of his coat. His ribs protruded slightly, a grim reminder of neglect, or worse. Ethan could feel the fragile thrum of life against his chest, a heart that refused to give up, and he whispered, "You're gonna make it, buddy. Just hang on." The pup's ears flicked faintly at the sound of Ethan's voice, a feeble acknowledgement, but enough to anchor Ethan's determination. The drive was tense. Snowflakes slapped against the windshield like tiny hammers, and gusts of wind rattled the car doors. Ethan kept one hand on the wheel and the other cradling Blitz, careful not to jostle him too much. He thought about the quiet of his house by the lake, the emptiness that had grown since his wife's passing 4 years ago, the long nights of silence that had settled over the walls like frost. He hadn't allowed another dog in his life since Max died, a German shepherd who had been his shadow, his comfort, and whose loss had left a hollow ache. But Blitz was different. Ethan's mind wandered briefly to the moments that had led him here. He had been on a routine check of the outskirts near the frozen lake when he heard the whimpering. The thought that someone could leave a young puppy to die in the storm chilled him more than the wind ever could. There was no time to dwell on motives or malice. Life hung in the balance, and he was the only chance Blitz had. The patrol car navigated a sharp curve, snow packed thick and ice threatening beneath. Ethan slowed but didn't stop, keeping the pup snug against his chest. "Almost there," he murmured, though he wasn't sure if the words were for Blitz or for himself. A memory of Max, his old dog, flickered in his mind. The way Max had padded silently into the kitchen at dawn, the warmth of his fur against Ethan's leg, the soft nudge of reassurance during dark nights. Blitz was just a pup, smaller, weaker, but he carried something Max had: a spark, a will to survive. The veterinary clinic loomed ahead, a modest building glowing with fluorescent light that cut through the snowstorm like a beacon. Ethan skidded lightly on the icy parking lot but managed to bring the car to a controlled stop. He jumped out, carrying Blitz carefully across the frozen lot, the tiny body so fragile it felt as though it could break in his arms. The snow crunched under his boots, each step a thunderous echo in the white silence. Inside, the warmth of the clinic hit him like a wave. The smell of antiseptic and the low hum of medical equipment created a strange sense of normalcy in the midst of chaos. A veterinary technician, Maggie Torres, stepped forward. Maggie was in her late 20s, petite, with dark hair tucked neatly under a knit cap and eyes that reflected equal parts determination and compassion. Her presence was calming, a quiet confidence that told Ethan Blitz was in capable hands. She reached for the pup without hesitation, checking his vitals and gently transferring him onto a heated blanket on a treatment table. Ethan's hands lingered briefly, reluctant to let go, whispering again, "Don't leave me, Blitz. Not now." Dr. Alyssa Mercer, the clinic's emergency veterinarian, appeared quickly. She was in her early 30s with curly brown hair pulled back into a practical ponytail, sharp brown eyes, and a calm, measured demeanor that masked the urgency of her work. She immediately assessed Blitz, noting his shallow breathing, pallid gums, and foam at the corners of his mouth. "Rodenticide," she said softly, almost to herself, yet loud enough for Ethan to hear. "Likely ingested overnight. Internal bleeding. He's fragile, but young, stronger than he looks. We need to act fast." Ethan nodded numbly, feeling a wave of helplessness mixed with fierce determination. "Do whatever it takes," he said. He stayed close, watching Alyssa hook up an IV line, place a tiny oxygen mask over Blitz's muzzle, and administer activated charcoal to bind the poison. The pup's chest rose faintly, a rhythm so delicate Ethan could hardly believe it was real. Minutes felt like hours as Ethan crouched beside the treatment table, hand resting lightly on Blitz's flank, feeling the faint warmth of life. The snowstorm outside raged on, a muted reminder of the harsh world Blitz had barely escaped. Ethan whispered stories of his childhood, tales of Max, of the lake, of a home that had grown silent too long. He spoke not for the pup to understand words, but for the reassurance of presence, of connection. Each murmur, each gentle touch, seemed to anchor Blitz further in the living world. By mid-afternoon, Alyssa reported the first tentative signs of stabilization. Blitz had not vomited since the antidote, and his vitals were improving slightly. Ethan exhaled, a tremor of relief passing through him. He watched the tiny body, so vulnerable, yet determined to survive. It struck him then, the courage of life clinging on, the innocence of a creature betrayed but unbroken. He realized he had not just rescued Blitz. In some unspoken way, Blitz had chosen him, coming to this frozen corner of Silverpine as if seeking sanctuary and someone who could see him through the storm. Hours passed. The storm outside deepened, snow accumulating against the clinic's windows, transforming the world into a frozen, white canvas. Ethan remained by Blitz's side, speaking in soft tones, feeling the weight of responsibility press against him. He made silent promises, that Blitz would not face death alone, that he would be safe, that he would not have to fight the cold and cruelty of the world by himself again. Night fell, and the storm continued, but inside the small clinic, a fragile bond had begun to form. Ethan's eyes, tired yet unyielding, never left Blitz. He leaned closer, placing his forehead lightly against the pup's head. "You're stronger than you think, buddy. I'll see you through this." The pup's ears twitched, and though his eyes remained glassy, there was a faint flicker of recognition, a fragile thread linking two lives, one scarred by loss, the other by betrayal, both seeking warmth in the cold of Silverpine's winter night. And as the clinic clock ticked steadily toward midnight, with the snowstorm raging outside and the town sleeping under its heavy blanket of white, Ethan understood this was only the beginning. The battle to save Blitz had begun, and he was ready to fight it, every second, every breath, beside the tiny, trembling life in his arms. The clinic's fluorescent lights flickered softly against the white haze of snow outside, which fell relentlessly, painting Silver Pine in silent, heavy strokes. Ethan sat beside Blitz, his boots resting on the heated floor mat, his coat shedding a faint warmth onto the tiny German Shepherd pup lying on the blanket. The room smelled of antiseptic and warmth, a stark contrast to the bitter chill of the storm outside. Every so often, a gust rattled the windows, making the thin curtains sway like delicate arms reaching out to the winter night. Blitz was still fragile, his chest rising and falling in shallow, irregular breaths. His coat was matted and damp, black with streaks of tawny brown, paws too large for his body, and eyes that flickered with life yet remained haunted. The pup's small ears twitched at every sound, the rustle of a curtain, the hum of the heater, the distant crackle of wind outside, but he did not resist Ethan's gentle touch. Ethan ran a hand along Blitz's flank, feeling the faint heartbeat beneath the thin layer of fur. "You're stronger than you look, Blitz," he whispered, his voice low, steady, a grounding force amid chaos. "We've got this. Just hold on." He remembered the first time he had held Blitz, frozen under the spruce by the lake, and how cold the pup had been, how fragile. Now, lying under the warm clinic lights, there was something tentative, almost miraculous, in each subtle twitch, each faint rise of the chest. Dr. Alyssa Mercer returned, her expression a mixture of cautious optimism and professional focus. "He's responding," she said softly, kneeling to check the IV line and vitals. "Stable for now. The antidote is working. We flushed what we could. Time will tell, but he's fighting." She adjusted the oxygen mask over Blitz's muzzle, careful not to disturb the tiny pup. Her hands moved with practiced precision, yet her eyes betrayed a softening that only those who truly care would show. Ethan nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He had always been steady, a figure of control in Silver Pine, guiding investigations, leading patrols, and enforcing the law. But here, in this quiet room, he was stripped of authority and replaced by something more vulnerable, a witness to life clinging stubbornly against the odds. Hours passed slowly, the snowstorm outside a constant white blur. Ethan remained seated, hand over Blitz's paw, feeling the warmth that seeped through. He told stories quietly about Max, the German Shepherd from his childhood who had followed him everywhere, who had been a silent companion through dark nights and lonely mornings. He spoke of the lake, of long walks along frozen shores, of the small joys of an ordinary life that had seemed so distant now. Blitz did not respond in words, he could not, but the pup's subtle twitches, the way his eyes followed Ethan, created a fragile dialogue that neither man nor dog could define. At one point, Maggie Torres came in, carrying a small tray of supplies. "We'll keep him under observation overnight," she explained. Her voice was calm, efficient, but gentle. "Temperature, vitals, fluids, and the antidote. He needs warmth and quiet, no sudden movements." Ethan watched as she adjusted the blanket around Blitz, making sure the pup's small body was snug and secure. He nodded, silently promising to remain as still and quiet as the room required. The hours stretched into evening. Outside, the snow thickened, a relentless sheet of white covering rooftops, roads, and trees. Inside, the room became a cocoon of stillness, interrupted only by the soft hum of the heater and the faint beeping of monitors. Ethan spoke softly, recounting the mundane and the extraordinary, from the falling snow to the memories of his wife who had passed 4 years prior. Her absence had hollowed the house by the lake, filled it with silence that pressed heavily on his chest. But here, with Blitz trembling and alive, that silence began to lift, replaced by a tentative warmth he had not expected to feel again. Dr. Mercer checked on Blitz once more, her eyes meeting Ethan's. "He's hanging on. I wouldn't say he's out of danger yet, but he has a real chance," she said. Ethan exhaled, letting the weight of relief settle on him. He was careful not to let hope dominate too quickly. He had been disappointed before, but the spark in Blitz's eyes, the subtle movement of his ears and tail, suggested resilience, a will to survive that mirrored his own inner strength. Ethan sat quietly, hand stroking Blitz's flank. He noticed the small movements, the shift of a paw, a slight turn of the head that indicated awareness. Each movement, however minor, was a victory. For Ethan, these moments were monumental. He whispered reassurance after reassurance, creating a rhythm of human presence, a constant heartbeat beside the frail pup. The snowstorm continued outside, relentless and silent, while inside the room, a bond was quietly solidifying. Hours became night. The storm continued to batter Silverpine, but inside the fragile cocoon remained undisturbed. Ethan had not left Blitz's side, sitting cross-legged on the floor, voice low and steady. He noticed every twitch, every blink, every faint sigh. There was a rhythm emerging, a quiet conversation between survival and care, a connection born of desperation and devotion. He spoke of the small joys, of walks through snowy woods, of sunlight on frozen lakes, of a life he wished he could reclaim for both of them. Blitz did not respond with barks or whines, but the subtle acknowledgement in his eyes was enough. By midnight, Blitz had taken small sips of water, guided by Ethan's careful hand. He was fragile still, but stable. Ethan felt an unfamiliar sense of peace, knowing that the pup had crossed the first threshold of survival. The snowstorm continued to howl, an untamed force outside, but within the room, life persisted, delicate yet defiant. Ethan adjusted the blanket one last time, smoothing the edges and ensuring Blitz was warm. He whispered once more, "You made it this far, Blitz. Don't stop now." The storm raged on, painting the night in relentless white, but for the first time in hours, Ethan allowed himself to hope. Blitz was alive. The pup was fighting. And though tomorrow promised new challenges, tonight was a victory, a fragile thread of life that neither man nor dog would let go. The bond, tentative yet undeniable, had begun to form, a bridge over the chasm of loss and loneliness, connecting two lives battered by cold, tragedy, and circumstance. And so the chapter closed not with certainty, but with a quiet promise. The battle for survival had begun, and Ethan Calloway would face it, every breath, every heartbeat, beside the small German shepherd pup who had claimed his heart amidst the blizzard. The morning sun struggled through the dense veil of snow clouds above Silverpine, casting a soft gray light across the frozen town. Streets, rooftops, and the edges of the lake were all coated in thick, unbroken white, muffling every sound except the occasional creak of tree branches burdened with ice. Inside the small veterinary clinic, the air was warm, scented faintly with antiseptic, and the comforting aroma of heated blankets. Ethan Calloway sat on the floor, eyes fixed on Blitz, who was curled on a soft fleece blanket, the first hints of strength returning to his fragile body. Blitz stirred, shifting his tiny head slightly toward Ethan. The German shepherd pup's black and tan fur, once matted and dull, now had a faint sheen under the fluorescent lights. His eyes, still wide with caution, carried the subtle spark of awareness, a fragile light that had been absent the night Ethan had found him shivering under the spruce. Ethan smiled, brushing a stray patch of damp fur from Blitz's brow. "Morning, buddy," he whispered, voice low, careful not to startle him. "Time to see what you can do today." The first steps were tentative. Blitz lifted a paw, then another, and wobbled forward, his balance shaky and uneven. Ethan remained close, guiding and steadying him with gentle hands. "Take it slow," he murmured. "I've got you." The pup's tail twitched faintly, almost imperceptibly, and with each small movement, Ethan felt a rush of hope and awe. It was as though Blitz was not only learning to walk again, but also beginning to trust life and him once more. Outside, the snow continued to fall, a constant rhythmic drum against the clinic's windows. The world beyond the glass was a blur of white, yet inside, each breath, each heartbeat of Blitz was vivid, urgent, and alive. Ethan recalled the nights he had spent alone, the silence that had wrapped around his home like a thick fog after his wife's passing. He realized how much he had needed this connection, this fragile life depending on his care, and he leaned closer, murmuring stories of snowfalls past, of frozen lakes and childhood adventures with Max, his first German shepherd. Blitz listened, ears twitching, eyes following every movement, as if absorbing each word and memory into a growing sense of security. The clinic staff moved quietly around the room, their presence familiar yet unobtrusive. Maggie Torres checked the monitors, adjusting the flow of fluids through the IV, while Dr. Alyssa Mercer came in to examine Blitz's progress. He's making good progress, Alyssa noted, her calm tone carrying a quiet relief. Still fragile, but he's eating small amounts now, and the vitals are stable. He's alert, and that's a good sign. Keep him warm, keep him calm, and let him take his time. Ethan nodded, watching Blitz lift his head slightly, sniffing the air, a cautious curiosity in his gaze. Hours passed slowly, each one measured in tiny victories. A paw lifted without trembling, a blink of the eyes that followed Ethan's movements, a tentative wag of the tail. Ethan spoke softly, filling the room with the sound of a voice that had been quiet for too long, recounting mundane details and stories of the town blanketed in snow. Blitz seemed to respond not with words or sound, but with attention, leaning subtly into Ethan's presence, trusting him inch by inch. By afternoon, Ethan helped Blitz to stand fully, holding his weight as the pup began to take deliberate steps across the clinic floor. Each wobble, each correction of balance, was a testament to resilience, to a willpower that refused to yield. Ethan could see the lines of fear in Blitz's eyes softening, replaced by a cautious engagement with the world around him. He encouraged the pup with gentle praise, scratching behind the ears, speaking of warmth, safety, and small victories. "You're doing it," Ethan said. "Every step is a step toward home, toward life." The storm outside intensified, snow piling against the windows in thick, unbroken sheets, creating an almost dreamlike barrier between the harsh winter world and the quiet room inside. Within this cocoon, Blitz discovered movement, strength, and the security of a steady presence in Ethan. The pup ventured further, testing his legs, nudging toward Ethan and occasionally flopping back onto the blanket for reassurance. Each small action was a declaration. Life mattered, trust mattered, survival mattered. Ethan noticed subtle details. The pup's fur had begun to regain some luster, the ears twitched at the faintest sounds, and the tail gave tentative, small wags when he approached. The connection between them was deepening, a bond forged in snow, fear, and care. For Ethan, this bond was transformative. He felt his own isolation, grief, and fatigue ebbing away as he invested himself fully in Blitz's fragile revival. The pup was no longer just an animal in need. He was a companion, a living reminder that even in the harshest winters, life could find a way. Evening came, and with it, a pause in the storm. Outside, the snow fell lighter, almost reverently, settling onto the world like a soft blanket. Ethan prepared a small portion of warm broth, crushing the medicine prescribed by Alyssa into it, and held it carefully for Blitz. The pup lapped the liquid slowly, hesitantly, but without resistance. Ethan felt a surge of relief mixed with awe. Each swallow was a small triumph, a tangible sign that the pup's body and spirit were mending. Night descended fully over Silver Pine, and the storm outside seemed to whisper against the windows. Ethan stayed beside Blitz, hand resting on the pup's back, speaking softly about the coming days, the quiet woods, the frozen lake, and the possibility of walks in the snow. Blitz settled slightly closer, a small paw pressing against Ethan's hand, a subtle yet undeniable gesture of trust and connection. Ethan realized that in saving Blitz, he was also saving something within himself, a part of his heart that had been locked away in grief, a part that now remembered warmth, hope, and companionship. Before leaving for the night, Ethan ensured Blitz was comfortable, adjusting blankets, refilling the water bowl, and tucking the pup into a snug corner of the heated area. "Sleep well, Blitz," he whispered. "Tomorrow, we try a few more steps, okay?" Blitz's eyes, now clearer, followed him briefly, as if acknowledging the promise. Outside, the snow continued to fall silently over Silver Pine. Lights glimmered in the distance, muted by the thick veil of white, and the world seemed paused, holding its breath for the small victories inside the clinic. Inside, a fragile bond had formed between man and pup, bridging years of loneliness and fear with warmth, trust, and tentative hope. Blitz had begun to reclaim life, and Ethan had begun to reclaim heart. As Ethan finally stepped back from the blanket, letting Blitz rest, he felt a profound sense of purpose settle in his chest. The battle for survival was far from over, but the first steps, both literal and metaphorical, had been taken. The chapter closed with Ethan watching Blitz curl on the blanket, ears flicking occasionally, chest rising with steady breaths, a fragile life clinging stubbornly yet triumphantly to hope. The blizzard raged outside, relentless, but inside the small clinic, warmth and life endured, quietly, defiantly, and beautifully. Snow had piled high across Silverpine, the small town wrapped in white silence. Streets were empty except for the occasional swirl of wind-driven powder, and the frozen lake gleamed faintly through the gray morning light. Inside Ethan Calloway's house by the lake, warmth radiated from the stone fireplace, contrasting sharply with the bitter cold outside. Blitz, now a little stronger after days of careful monitoring and nourishment, lay curled near the hearth, his black and tan coat slightly glossier, ears twitching at every creak of the old wooden floor. Ethan watched him quietly, a mug of hot coffee warming his hands, thinking about how far they had come. Blitz was no longer the fragile pup Ethan had found shivering under the spruce by the frozen lake. He had taken his first steps, lapped water from a bowl, and even attempted to nibble at a small chew toy Ethan had placed near him. Yet there was something in Blitz's behavior that kept Ethan alert. A new wariness, a sharp focus on the edges of rooms, the faintest noises in the yard beyond the frosted windows. It had started the night before. Blitz had sat rigid by the front door, ears perked, muscles tense, eyes locked on the far corner of the fenced yard. Ethan had watched, puzzled, the snow brushing silently against the gate outside. Then he had noticed them. 2 fresh boot prints, unmistakable against the white snow. The prints ended abruptly at the fence, leaving no trace beyond. Ethan's stomach had twisted at the thought. Someone had been there, watching, perhaps waiting. He rose now, stepping carefully to the back door. Blitz immediately followed, tail low but body rigid, sniffing the air, eyes scanning. Ethan crouched beside him, fingers brushing the top of Blitz's head. "What do you see, buddy?" he murmured. Blitz remained still, ears twitching toward the darkened corner of the yard. The pup's focus was intense, unyielding, a silent alarm Ethan had come to respect. The memory of the pup's arrival, cold and poisoned, flashed in Ethan's mind. He had initially believed Blitz had been abandoned. But the recent discovery of footprints, the subtle tension in the pup's behavior, and the precision of the entry all suggested otherwise. Blitz was not here by accident. He had survived an ordeal carefully orchestrated by someone who knew what they were doing. The thought sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. Ethan opened the back door, and the icy wind brushed through the room, carrying the scent of snow, pine, and something faintly metallic. Blitz stepped out cautiously, sniffing the area, nostrils flaring. The pup's black and tan coat glistened under the pale light, and Ethan could see the muscles beneath the fur tense, ready to spring. He remembered the words of Dr. Alyssa Mercer. Sometimes, abused or stolen animals retain an instinctive awareness of danger, a memory of threats they cannot name. Ethan wondered if Blitz remembered the hands that had once held him in harshness, or used him as bait. The morning wore on. Blitz patrolled the edges of the yard, pausing frequently near the fence line, ears pricked, tail low. Ethan followed at a cautious distance, noting the meticulous way Blitz scanned every inch of the snow-covered ground. And then he saw it, faint, almost hidden, marks pressed into the snow beyond the far corner of the yard. Boot prints, deeper this time, suggesting someone had returned, testing boundaries, observing. Ethan's pulse quickened. The calm of Silverpine's winter morning felt suddenly fragile. He called the non-emergency police line. Within minutes, Officer Ramirez arrived. The young patrolman, mid-20s, short, wiry, with a practical haircut and a demeanor that combined curiosity and respect, knelt near the prints, snapping photos and taking notes. "Could be a trespasser, maybe casing the property," he said, voice low. "Doesn't look like a break-in, but I'd keep lights on at night, lock everything." Ethan watched Blitz, who remained close, body tense but controlled, eyes never leaving the corner of the yard where the prints had been. Ramirez reached down to pat Blitz's head, but the pup only glanced at him, unyielding, a silent warning rather than a friendly acknowledgement. After the officer left, Ethan stood by the porch, hand resting lightly on Blitz's back. "You were poisoned," he said quietly, voice catching slightly. "Then you show up in my garden, and now someone's back." Blitz's ears flicked toward the shadowed corner again, tail low, eyes alert. Ethan felt a creeping chill. Whoever had tried to harm Blitz had planned more than a single act. This was intentional, deliberate, a game of control and observation that Blitz had survived. Determined to understand, Ethan began researching the local rescue networks and lost dog reports. His eyes scanned post after post, searching for a clue, a pattern. Most were routine, nothing alarming, until one entry caught his attention. A volunteer from a shelter in East Silverpine had posted, "If anyone sees a young black and tan German Shepherd pup limping or appearing poisoned, please contact us. He went missing from our intake center last week under suspicious circumstances." Ethan's heart tightened. He grabbed his phone and dialed the number. A woman answered. "Hello, this is Erica," she said. Ethan described Blitz in detail, his black and tan coat, his age, his timid but alert behavior. Silence followed his description, a pause heavy with unspoken realization. "I think that's him," Erica said finally, voice trembling slightly. "We didn't lose him. He was taken." The revelation was chilling. Blitz had not been abandoned. He had escaped from a facility that had failed to protect him, from people who had inflicted trauma upon him deliberately. Whoever had left him at Ethan's house had done so with a plan, perhaps to test his survival, perhaps to keep him away from something worse. Ethan felt a surge of protectiveness, a fierce resolve tightening in his chest. Blitz had survived poison, cold, and abandonment, and now he needed security, guidance, and care more than ever. That night, the wind howled around Silverpine, rattling the eaves and shaking snow from the heavy pine branches. Blitz remained alert, ears pricked, body rigid near the front door. Ethan double-checked locks, swept the yard with a flashlight, and ensured all windows were secured. Blitz stayed at his side, occasionally letting out a soft growl at sounds too subtle for Ethan to hear clearly. It was as if the pup had become a sentinel, guarding the home that had saved him just as surely as he was guarding Ethan. By the time Ethan sat beside the fireplace, snow piling against the windows like drifts of powdered silver, he understood the truth. Blitz had been through a world designed to break him, yet here he was, alive, cautious, and unwavering. And now, together, they would face whatever shadows had returned, side by side. The wind had finally begun to ease across Silverpine, though snow still drifted in soft sheets, piling over rooftops, fences, and the frozen lake. Ethan Calloway sat in the living room, coffee cooling in his hands, eyes scanning the yard. Blitz lay curled at his feet, ears alert, chest rising and falling steadily. The pup had grown stronger in the past days, legs more confident, movements purposeful, yet a vigilance lingered in his gaze, a quiet acknowledgement that the world beyond the window was still dangerous. The late-night silence was broken by a faint scrape, almost imperceptible along the far corner of the yard. Blitz's head lifted sharply, his ears pricked, tail stiffening, body tensing in preparation. Ethan's pulse quickened. He had seen this before, the subtle warning, the readiness, the focus that said more than any bark or growl could convey. Blitz was not just aware, he was preparing. Through the dim moonlight, Ethan caught a shadow moving low, deliberate. A figure dressed in dark clothing, gloved hands clutching a black duffel bag, prowled along the edge of the property. The man moved with quiet intent, testing boundaries, unaware that eyes as sharp as the stormy night itself were upon him. Blitz rose silently, coiled like a spring, muscles taut, every fiber of his being ready. Ethan grabbed a flashlight and his phone, heart hammering, dialing 911. "Someone's in the yard, possibly armed," he whispered into the line, trying not to startle the pup. The intruder tested the side gate. It held firm. Blitz's low growl vibrated through the floorboards, warning the man that he had been seen. Then, in a burst of agility that belied his small size, Blitz lunged. Teeth bared, he struck low at the man's pant leg, yanking him off balance. Tools scattered, dirt flew, and the intruder let out a scream of surprise. Ethan burst through the door behind him, shining the flashlight into the figure's face. "Get out! The police are on their way!" he shouted. Blitz did not release his grip until Ethan called him back twice. His breathing was heavy, eyes blazing, but his obedience was unwavering. He returned to Ethan's side, body still between the man and the door, chest heaving, yet proud. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance as the intruder staggered to his feet and fled through the gate, disappearing into the night. By the time the police arrived, the man was gone, leaving behind only footprints pressed into the snow, rapidly filling with fresh drift. Officer Ramirez arrived, kneeling to examine Blitz, brushing the snow from his coat. "This is a damn good dog," he said quietly. "Most wouldn't have reacted like that. Not only protective, but smart." He knew exactly what he was doing. Ethan knelt beside Blitz, feeling the warmth of the pup's body against his leg, the solid reassurance of life and loyalty mingling in the cold night air. Later that morning, sunlight spilled across the yard, gilding the frozen lake and reflecting off the pristine blanket of snow. Blitz trotted carefully across the porch, tail wagging gently now, chest rising steady with each breath. The storm had passed, leaving a stillness that felt different, lighter, safer. The world outside remained a place of unknown threats, but inside, life had reclaimed its rhythm. Blitz, once fragile and poisoned, now moved with confidence, fully recovered in both body and spirit. Ethan held the leash as they walked through the snow-covered yard. He glanced down at Blitz, whose gaze met his with quiet assurance, as if to say, "We made it through, together." The bond that had begun in a small, snow-laden clinic had blossomed into trust and companionship. Each step they took together reinforced what Ethan had long known but had only just felt again. Life was precious, fragile, and worth protecting. Later, Ethan returned to the shelter in East Silverpine with Blitz, ensuring the legal adoption was finalized. The shelter volunteer, Erica, a woman in her early 30s with warm eyes and a gentle smile, met them outside. She gasped softly, hand flying to her mouth as Blitz stepped from the car. "Oh my God, it's him," she whispered, tears welling. Blitz hesitated for a moment, then walked slowly toward her, head tilted, eyes reflecting both recognition and trust. Erica explained. Blitz's original name had been Tank. He had been rescued from a suspected dogfighting breeder with 6 other German shepherds, all traumatized, underweight, and barely socialized. Days later, the shelter had been broken into, and Blitz was taken. No signs of forced entry, nothing to indicate a simple theft. It was calculated. Ethan felt a chill at the thought. Blitz's poisoning and abandonment in his yard were not accidents. They were warnings, a message, a test. Yet here he was, alive and thriving under Ethan's protection. The adoption was fast-tracked. Blitz was now legally Ethan's permanently, and the weight of that responsibility filled him with both pride and resolve. Back home, Ethan clipped a new blue nylon collar around Blitz's neck, a symbol of fresh beginnings, safety, and belonging. Blitz paused at the garden gate, tail stiff, eyes locked on the corner where the footprints had appeared. For a fleeting moment, a shadow moved, then vanished, but Blitz's reaction was clear. The world had threatened him, yet he was ready. That night, the house was quiet, the storm completely past. Blitz lay at Ethan's feet, chest rising gently with each breath, ears relaxed, tail tucked contentedly. Ethan settled into a chair, hand resting over the pup's back. For the first time in years, the silence in his home felt full, alive, and comforting rather than hollow. Blitz had survived poison, abandonment, and betrayal, yet he remained steadfast, loyal, and aware. Ethan realized something profound. He had believed he had saved Blitz. Yet in truth, the pup had saved him as well, rescuing him from isolation, grief, and the quiet despair that had accumulated over 4 long winters. The garden, the porch, the snow-covered lake beyond, they were no longer just backdrops to solitude. They had become the stage for recovery, trust, and a future built together. Outside, the morning light reflected off the snow, casting a golden hue over the frozen landscape. Blitz nudged Ethan's hand, eyes bright, alert, yet peaceful. The pup's journey from near death to this moment of triumph symbolized resilience, loyalty, and hope. Ethan scratched behind his ears, smiling softly. "You did it, Blitz. You really did it," he murmured. Blitz responded with a gentle nudge, the faintest wag of his tail, and a sense of completion washed over Ethan. The day unfolded with quiet contentment. Blitz explored the yard under Ethan's watchful eye, sniffing the snow, testing his legs, and even returning to the spot where he had first been found, as if acknowledging the life he had been granted. Ethan prepared a small meal for him, which Blitz devoured eagerly, then returned to curl at Ethan's side, chest rising with steady breaths. It was a tableau of survival and trust, of life reclaimed and a bond forged through adversity. Even as shadows stretched long across the snow and the sun dipped low, painting Silverpine in amber and gold, Ethan and Blitz sat together on the porch. The house and garden, once scenes of threat and uncertainty, now radiated warmth and belonging. Blitz had faced death, darkness, and betrayal, but he had endured, thrived, and chosen life. And in doing so, he had brought Ethan with him, rescuing a heart long dormant, awakening hope in a world that had seemed frozen and unforgiving. This story reminds us that even in the coldest, darkest moments, miracles are possible through faith, love, and compassion. Just like Blitz survived against all odds, we too can overcome challenges in our daily lives when we trust in God's guidance and care for those in need. Every small act of kindness can change a life, just as one life changed Ethan's forever. Let this inspire you to be a light for others, to open your heart to those who need help, and to never underestimate the power of hope. If this story touched your heart, please share it, leave a comment, and subscribe to support more stories of courage and faith. May God bless you and your loved ones. If you believe in the power of miracles, type Amen in the comments and join our family of hope.